For 27 years, people asked the same question. Where did Thomas Whitaker go? He vanished without a trace. No note, no body, no crime scene. His wife said he walked out one evening and never came back. The police searched. The town whispered. But nothing ever surfaced. And over time the world moved on. But the truth was never gone. It was hidden, in plain sight. What no one knew was that the woman who held the candlelight vigil, who cried on camera and comforted their children, was the one who put him in the ground. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to CrimeCortex, where we uncover the stories buried beneath silence, lies, and time. This is the case of the woman who killed her husband and got away with it for decades. Thomas Whitaker was the kind of man people described as dependable. Not flashy, not dramatic, just steady. He worked as a structural engineer, the kind who loved order, routine, and family dinners at 6 p.m. sharp. His co-workers called him the anchor, a man who could be counted on even when things got chaotic. At home, he was a father of 2 and a husband of 17 years. He loved jazz records, long drives, and crossword puzzles with his morning coffee. To neighbors, Thomas and his wife, Evelyn, were a model couple. Quiet, polite, predictable. But predictability has a way of masking what's really going on beneath the surface. The last time anyone saw him was a chilly evening in October. He'd just finished dinner, kissed his kids goodnight, and, according to Evelyn, stepped out for a walk to clear his head. He never came back. At first, no one panicked. Maybe he was staying with a friend. Maybe work stress had finally caught up to him. But by the next morning, when his car was still in the driveway and his phone was still on the nightstand, the questions began. And Evelyn had an answer for every single one of them. Evelyn Whitaker played the part of the grieving wife with haunting perfection. She told police that Thomas had been distant in the weeks leading up to his disappearance. That he'd been withdrawn, tired, overwhelmed. She said he'd mentioned needing space, possibly even a break from the marriage. He'd left with nothing but his coat, she said. No wallet, no keys, just vanished into the night. The community rallied behind her. Friends dropped off casseroles. Neighbors helped watch the children. Candlelight vigils were held, missing posters stapled to telephone poles. She gave one tearful interview to the local news, her voice cracking as she said, "We just want him home. Please, if you're out there, Tom, come back." People believed her. Why wouldn't they? She was quiet, respectable, a devoted mother, and heartbreak looked good on her. But behind the soft eyes and steady voice, there were cracks forming, small inconsistencies in her timeline, gaps in her recollection. A few of Thomas's closest friends said the marriage hadn't been as picture-perfect as it seemed. He'd confided in one of them about walking on eggshells at home. Still, with no evidence and no body, Evelyn's story stood. And Thomas Whitaker became just another name on a cold case shelf. At first, the investigation into Thomas Whitaker's disappearance followed a familiar pattern. Local police canvassed the neighborhood. They checked hospitals, shelters, out-of-state relatives. They traced credit cards. None were used. His phone untouched. His passport still locked in a drawer. Nothing. Detectives questioned Evelyn, of course. Multiple times. Her answers were steady, even rehearsed. He went out to clear his head. He'd been under stress. No, he didn't mention where he was going. Yes, she was worried too. Her story never changed. There were no signs of struggle in the house. No signs of forced entry. No blood. No surveillance footage. Just a man who walked out of his home one night and disappeared, like vapor. Over time the search slowed. The news coverage faded. And the case, like so many others, was quietly labeled inactive. But there were things that never quite sat right. An officer noted that Evelyn had vacuumed the entire house the morning after Thomas vanished. That she gave away most of his clothes within a month. That when their kids asked questions, she didn't let them linger. Still, there was no hard proof. And without it, suspicion wasn't enough. What no one realized then was that the evidence had been there all along. It just hadn't been found, yet. In the years after Thomas Whitaker's disappearance, Evelyn did what people said was remarkably brave. She kept the house, raised the children, went back to work at the local tax office. For all appearances, she was the picture of quiet resilience. She never remarried, but she dated, quietly, cautiously, and always with men who didn't ask too many questions. The kids grew up and moved out. The neighborhood changed. And over time, Evelyn faded into the rhythm of a normal life. The whispers, though, never fully stopped. A few longtime neighbors remembered things that felt strange. Evelyn having a new area of the backyard landscaped shortly after Thomas vanished. A fire pit installed where there hadn't been one before. One even recalled seeing her dragging something heavy into the garage the night he disappeared, but convinced herself it was just trash. There were no breakthroughs. No new leads. Just a family's history shaped around a ghost. But the past, no matter how carefully buried, has a way of clawing its way back. And nearly 30 years later, that's exactly what it did. It started with a plumbing issue. The house had been sold twice since Evelyn moved away. The new owners, unaware of the home's history, called a contractor to investigate a drainage problem in the backyard. When they dug beneath the concrete patio Evelyn had poured nearly 3 decades earlier, they found something. Wrapped in plastic. Buried deep. Human remains. The local sheriff's office was called immediately. Forensics confirmed what the town had almost forgotten. It was Thomas Whitaker. The news hit like a lightning strike. Within days, the cold case was reopened. DNA matched. Dental records confirmed. The body showed signs of blunt force trauma to the back of the skull, deliberate, calculated. The case went from forgotten to active overnight. And all eyes turned to one person, the woman who had insisted for nearly 30 years that she had no idea where her husband had gone. But Evelyn Whitaker hadn't counted on time catching up to her. The arrest came quietly. Evelyn Whitaker, now 72, was living in a retirement community 2 towns over when officers arrived at her door. She didn't cry. She didn't deny. She simply said, "It was a long time ago." Under questioning, the story unraveled. On the night Thomas disappeared, they had argued, loudly. About money, about his plan to leave her, about a woman he may have been seeing. It wasn't the first fight, but it was the last. According to Evelyn, she grabbed the nearest thing she could, a metal candle holder, and swung. He collapsed instantly. She said it wasn't planned, that it was a moment of rage. But what she did next told a different story. She waited until the children were asleep, cleaned the blood, dragged his body to the garage, wrapped him in plastic, dug through the night alone. And before dawn, she had buried him beneath the new patio she would claim was a landscaping project. For years she lived with that secret. She confessed it all without hesitation, as if the truth had become too heavy to carry. But what haunted investigators most was how ordinary she had remained. No signs of remorse. No panic. Just a quiet, well-mannered woman who had spent nearly 30 years living on top of the man she killed. The courtroom was packed. Some came for justice. Some came for closure. And some came simply to see the woman who had fooled them for decades. Evelyn Whitaker sat quietly at the defense table, her gray hair pinned back, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked more like a grandmother than a killer, but the facts were undeniable. The prosecution laid it out, the motive, the weapon, the cover-up. They showed photos of the hidden grave. Forensic evidence of the trauma to Thomas's skull. The confession. The silence that followed. Her children, now grown, sat in the gallery, faces pale, eyes hollow. They'd grown up believing their father had abandoned them. Now they had to face the truth, he had never left them. Their mother had taken him. Evelyn's defense tried to argue diminished responsibility, claimed years of emotional abuse, mental stress, that it was an act of desperation, not malice. But the jury saw it for what it was, murder followed by decades of deception. After 2 days of deliberation, the verdict came in, guilty of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 25 years to life. Most said it felt like justice, even if it came far too late. In the quiet that followed the trial, the town was left shaken. Not because Evelyn Whitaker had fooled them, but because she had done it so effortlessly. For nearly 3 decades, she smiled through bake sales, waved at neighbors, tucked her children in at night, all while living atop the grave she had dug with her own hands. Her children, now adults with families of their own, issued a short statement. They asked for privacy. They asked for time. They said they no longer knew who their mother was. Thomas Whitaker was buried again, this time properly, with his name, with truth, with the kind of peace he had been denied for far too long. Evelyn's story became a case study of how guilt can hide behind routine, how time can erode suspicion, and how secrets, no matter how deep you bury them, have a way of clawing back to the surface. And in the age of cold case reopenings, forensic breakthroughs, and digital footprints, one thing became clear. No one really gets away with murder. Not forever. For years, Evelyn Whitaker wore grief like a veil. And behind that veil was the truth, cold, buried, and waiting. This case asks a question we rarely want to confront. How well do we really know the people we love? Thomas trusted his wife. His children trusted their mother. A town trusted its story. But in the end, trust wasn't enough to stop what happened. This story unsettled you, it should. Because sometimes the greatest betrayals wear the calmest faces. At CrimeCortex, we tell the stories time tried to erase, using research, empathy, and AI-powered insight to uncover what others overlook. Subscribe if you believe every victim deserves their truth told. And tell us in the comments, did Evelyn snap, or was this always who she really was? Thank you for watching. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and never stop seeking the truth.